Well, if you've kept your eyes on the social justice warrior scene of late, you will see that this is the dawn of fascism.
I would have sheltered the Jews, I would have fought 17 Nazi tigers with my bare hands, We are about to be tested. Those of us who have had fantasies about what it was like to live under a fascist authoritarian regime are about to be tested, because that's what we're looking at. Or that you don't really think this is that bad. That you don't really think white supremacy is that bad. That you don't really think rape culture is that bad. That you don't really think fascism is that bad.
Indeed, it's so close to the end that we have Greta Christina here telling you that Trump is the next Hitler. Well, effectively.
And if it helps you to think of it this way, in 50 years, in 75 years, in 100 years, who you want to be in this history. Do you want to be the people who stood by, defended themselves by saying, we didn't know. We didn't know how bad it was. Remember earlier I said that I was kind of being an asshole for telling you all this? This is why I'm being an asshole. You don't get to be that person now. You do not get to be. That excuse is gone for you. You know. You don't get to say after this is all over, if it's over, that you didn't know.
So now that you know Trump is the next Hitler, you can no longer sit idly by, otherwise it'll all be your fault.
The biggest plan that I have so far for this new world, is, other than get out of bed every morning, is I am co-organizer of this community in San Francisco called the Godless Perverts, and my body is uncomfortable. It's hard for me to eat. My body is uncomfortable. It's hard for me to eat. And on the subject of hurt feelings, because I know there's going to be a lot of hurt feelings. There's going to be a lot of hurt feelings. This is going to be hard. We are all raw. None of us knows where to go. But privilege means we have advantages that we haven't earned. So those of us who have privilege, I'm a woman, I'm queer, I'm mentally ill. In some ways, I'm on the very privileged end of that stick. I'm white. When the people who are in most danger are talking about this, are talking about the new world we're in, do not make the conversation about you. My body is uncomfortable. It's hard for me to eat. It's hard for me to sleep. I'm grinding my teeth. I am really uncomfortable. Do not make the conversation about you.
So is this really the dawn of fascism in America? Well, before we come to that, maybe a little word on free thought, which goes back to how I was actually kicked off free thought blogs for criticizing, you guessed it, feminism. Yeah, being against the majority does not necessarily mean that you're wrong.
I think the contrary is true. Free Thought Blogs is enriched by people who are not afraid to speak their minds to the plurality, and the plurality shows its integrity by not ejecting dissenting views. This is, of course, the origin of tenure. It's how we move past the safe consensus of dogma and suffer the slings and arrows that we may be wrong, beyond the necessity for an open forum where people are not afraid to speak their minds. I should also like to add that many people have tried to stop me from saying things that they didn't like under various forms of duress. Scientologists, Muslims, creationists, libertarians, theologians/philosophers, etc. I think it's now a matter that you should thoughtfully reflect on, is that you are now suggesting taking such action against me because I expressed views on feminism. Best wishes, Thunderfoot. And with that, I was banned from Free Thought Blogs.
And yeah, I know I took it in the neck for saying that both Trump and Brexit were bad ideas. Thousands of people unsubscribed from this channel. But this wasn't the first time I'd made unpopular videos. Indeed, my first videos about feminism were very unpopular at the time. And of course, then there was the reason I came on YouTube in the first place, which was my opposition to the Iraq War. Now, this was mostly from a scientific standpoint, in that I knew the bullshit coming out of the Bush and Blair governments was bullshit.
That's it? Oh, yes! He's the liar. Intercept and scan. Gotcha. Let's look at the facts, shall we?
6 months after he said Osama bin Laden must be caught dead or alive, This president was asked, where's Osama bin Laden? He said,
So I don't know where he is. Nor do, I just don't spend that much time on him. I repeat what I said. I truly am not that concerned about him.
Mr. President.
Gosh, I don't think I ever said I'm not worried about Osama bin Laden. It's kind of one of those exaggerations.
Liar!
Chemical weapons on the battlefield are about as dangerous as conventional bombs, and the same goes for basically chemical weapons used for terrorism. Now sure, you can do your calculations and work out that a kilogram of sarin will kill about 10,000 people, which is true enough. Oh, a disclaimer, it's not really nerve agent, it's a block of ice. Right, so let's take a look at the Tokyo subway attack. They had 5 kilos of sarin, enough to kill 50,000 people, right? How many did they actually kill? About 10. 2 heavily armed delinquent teenagers killed more people at Columbine than these terrorists with their 5 kilograms of sarin. Or looked at another way, the cult that perpetrated this nerve gas attack would have probably killed more people if instead of giving them sarin, they'd just given them knives and told them to stab people. Delivery was always the problem with nerve agents. To a large extent, the same is true with conventional arms. Technically, a bullet, about that sort of size, weighing about 10 grams will kill someone. So do you know what the average weight of munitions needed to kill one person in World War II was? About a ton. It took, on average, 10 times your own body weight in munitions to kill one person in World War II. Nerve agents, to a very large degree, are no more dangerous than conventional weapons. They just scare people a lot more.
Create a climate of fear, and it's easy to keep the borders closed. It's just a matter of emphasis. The right word in the right broadcast repeated often enough can destabilize an economy, invent an enemy, change a vote.
Indeed, it's one of my more devious things that I like to wind gun nuts up about. You know, should I be allowed to possess nerve agents? I keep mine in the freezer. Because they fear nerve agents, where in practicality they're really not that much more dangerous than other weapons like guns. But it is interesting watching them use the exact same rationale against nerve agents that others use against gun ownership. You know, that sure, they're dangerous, but you have a constitutional right to have it. And in capable, responsible hands, it's perfectly safe. In fact, it was one of the more sad and disturbing developments of terrorism lately, is that these religious nutters have finally worked out that a single guy with a gun is far more simple, more effective, and more dangerous than bombs. I mean, believe me, if you had the gun ownership of America combined with a Muslim population the size of, say, France or the UK, it would be a nightmare scenario. I guess we can just be thankful that there isn't this critical mass population of Muslims in America, or that gun ownership in Europe just isn't that big. Anyway, coming back to chemical weapons in Iraq. To make weapons, you need a factory, whether they're conventional munitions or chemical munitions. And for that scale, you need a factory. And those were known to be decommissioned in Iraq.
My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence.
Liar!
Active chemical munitions bunkers.
Liar!
Mobile production facilities.
Liar! Let's look at the facts, shall we?
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
We are able to keep arms from him. His military forces have not been rebuilt.
Nukes are mind-blowingly harder to make than nerve agents. Hell, even I might struggle to make a nuke.
We cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun, that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Liar!
And we believe he has, in fact, reconstituted nuclear weapons.
Liar!
We don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud.
Liar!
But it was bloody clear that Saddam was nowhere near a nuke. So I just saw this rampant fear-mongering from the Bush-Blair government. Oh, and boy, did I call bullshit on it. Then I saw the criminal mismanagement of the actual campaign. You know, the first thing that they did on conquering Iraq was disband the military and police forces, something that the Allies didn't even do when they defeated Nazi Germany. because it takes years, perhaps even decades, to replace it with something effective. And in the meantime, you've turned every professional trained to use a gun onto the street without a job. Now, at the time, I got no end of grief from people telling me how I was undermining America and putting the troops at risk, and how I was a bleeding heart liberal. In fact, what actually really got me into making videos is when I came across this video of an Apache attack helicopter hosing a farmer and his son plowing a field. Yeah, plowing a field, taking the field markers out, and it was mistaken for a weapon.
The farmer has been managing to plough his field in straight strips. This means that there is enough light for him to see what he's doing.
I got a guy running, throwing a weapon. Smoke him.
This falls abysmally short of the standard of conduct I would expect from a professional First World Army.
He threw it off in the field. He's running back to his vehicle. Clear to engage or no? Stand by.
Having not received permission to engage, the triggerman asked the question again, but this time it's the reverse rhetorical question.
Are you starting to lose a weapon? Positive.
However, the gunner is not certain that it is a weapon as he pans out back into the field to try and locate the weapon. He fails to do so because it is almost completely thermalized with the field already.
Personnel throwing weapons out in the field, running back into the vehicle. Viper 2-4 spotted him. He's going to be engaged this time. Roger, that's at that same location. Just south of my location. If he goes back out there, he goes towards it. Roger, can you work up a see what he does? Wait one, he'll pass it up.
So the guys on the ground are just standing around, and when they go out back into the field, you'll notice that they come out about 10 feet in front of where they dropped their rod-shaped object.
Now he's running back. What's this other guy doing? Guys engaging. You see them with the weapons in their hands? Yes.
This is unforgivable. These people do not have weapons in their hands.
You see them with the weapons in their hands? Yes. You see them with the weapons in their hands? Yes. Had a laser range on him. Auto range. Fuck. Better. Range auto.
You know, because terrorists frequently spend hours ploughing open fields for cover. You know, you don't win the hearts and minds of people by blowing them out of them. Not that winning hearts and minds was ever really a feasible goal in the first place, because, you know, it takes years for cultures to change, and that's assuming they want to change at all. So yeah, I got loads of people telling me that I didn't know what I was talking about. Hell, it was a bit early to say I should stick to science. But if they'd known that I was a scientist, yeah, they would have probably been saying that I should stick to science. After that, I sort of moved off into busting creationists and then into feminism, where I ripped that one a new one. But this was before every jackman and his dog was laying into feminism. In fact, the only guy who'd really done it before me was The Amazing Atheist. And the only reason I hadn't done it earlier was for fear of starting a civil war in the atheist community. Then I realized it was already split, and FUBAR. And if you're going to put your hand into the pickle jar, you put it in right up to the elbow. And yeah, God did I take it in the neck at the time. And when I laid into feminism, they were all there. Thunderfoot should stick to science. I guess what I'm saying is that every time I've made an unpopular video thus far, in the long game, it's not been quite so clear who really didn't understand politics here. In short, saying that I don't understand politics or that I should stick to science is not really a very compelling argument. Hell, it's a completely fact-free argument. Really, I mean, what's your argument here? That only people who are experts in politics should be allowed to discuss politics? You know, which is why you now have an American businessman for president. Or is it that scientists cannot be correct about anything else? Or maybe, just maybe, it's that I presented reasoned arguments that challenged some political prejudices. And seeing as it was kind of difficult to actually show anything was actually wrong with the argument, you just got round to turning the fact that I was a scientist, a professional pattern finder, into a vice, whereas they, who were by all accounts neither professional scientists or politicians, for some bizarre reason are suddenly the oracles of all wisdom and knowledge on this. I mean, don't get me wrong, I welcome criticism and decent arguments, but you've got to present something that's actually compelling. And if you do, sure, I'm more than willing to change my mind. So let me just give you an example. Initially, with the Iraq War, I was against it because I knew that all the justifications for it were bullshit, even though they had wall-to-wall media backing. Hitchens, on the other hand, was far more hawkish, and I never really quite understood why, until I got some plausible death threats from Muslim sorts myself, which do kind of change your perspective on this. Now, sure, you'll get some of those not all Muslims type folks, and sure, we can break this down by demographics, but to a first-degree approximation, a reasonable barometer for an ideology is when you criticize it, how many of its advocates threaten to kill you. Well, really, does anything come close to Islam? I mean, shit, I've had my problems with the creationists, and they call you immoral and that you don't understand religion and that you should stick to science. And sure, they got me banned off YouTube for a bit by filing false DMCAs. But I really don't recall anything like with Islam. And I mixed it up with Scientologists, and they call you a suppressive person. It's like, oh no, call a shrink, I'm a broken man. I've mixed it up with libertarians, and they say that you worship the state and you should stick to science, and they flagged the odd video of mine. But hey, that was back in the days when that sort of thing was easier to do on YouTube. I mixed it up with feminists, and sure, they call you a misogynist, and they got me banned off Twitter for a bit, and they tried to get me fired at work, and they said I should stick to science. But that was about it. And yeah, I mixed it up with Trump supporters, and sure, they call you salty and cuck a lot, and they say you should stick to science, but honestly, compared to what you can expect to get by criticizing Islam, they're a pretty chill bunch. Now, about the time that everyone wanted to get out of Iraq because it had turned into a complete shit show, yeah, no, who could have seen that coming? I was actually trying to look on the bright side, in that sure, it kind of depends how you count war dead. You know, if a hospital gets blown up as a result of the war, do the people who die because of the lack of treatment available count as war dead? So anyway, yeah, I mean, if you include the biggest number, the number of people killed in the Iraq War was about 500,000. And the bottom line is it had turned the Middle East into a complete shit show. And the Muslims who took their religion seriously were free to do what they wanted. And they were happily killing each other, you know, as had been the usual pastime for people in that neck of the woods for the past few hundred years. Basically, the export of terrorism was no longer a priority for them. Not exactly a happy scenario. But this war had cost America something just short of about $3 trillion. That's about $10,000 for every single American. You could have bought every single man, woman and child in America a brand new car for that sort of cash. And that war was fought on my tax dollars. And when you shell out that sort of cash, and a lot of people have died, maybe out of a bit of denial, the best you can do is sort of philosophically search for some silver lining there. Then, of course, came Syria. And with the destabilized Iraq, this led to the formation of ISIS and the immigration exodus that led to a great spate of terrorist attacks in Europe, and of course was one of the key selling points for Brexit, which only just managed to pass by a narrow margin. All of this came out of some bullshit attack on Iraq based on some bullshit about chemical weapons from the last Republican president and his English lapdog.
And to make a case in the democracy, you must convince by yourself. Excuse me, I'm not convinced. This is my problem. And I cannot go to the public and say, oh, well, let's go to war because there are reasons and so on, and I don't believe in that.
Well, America, now you have a new Republican president-elect. Now, on the upside, Bush was a known commodity. You knew what you could expect to get if you elected him. But there might be a significant element here of better the dumb devil you know than the populist angel you don't. Now, I've seen quite a lot of rampant fear-mongering about Trump being a fascist.
We are about to be tested. Those of us who have had fantasies about what it was like to live under a fascist authoritarian regime are about to be tested, because that's what we're looking at.
You know, worse than Hitler. Firstly, it really pisses me off when people throw around Nazi as a buzzword, because there are many valid lessons of history to be learned from World War II, and so many of those are now reflexively dismissed as Poe's law because the dirge of historically illiterate morons who simply want to call someone an evil empire. I mean, firstly, Hitler was a rags to riches guy driven by making Germany great again. And yeah, he cared about that sort of thing, you know, driven by ideology, destroying Bolshevism and the such like. And if you cut it short, before he started wars with everyone, all that death camp thing, the guy wasn't a pleasant guy, but he did get Germany back on his feet by some massive infrastructure type programs, you know, building the autobahns, that sort of thing. Kind of difficult to see that in Trump, in that the only thing that's really ever driven the man was making money. I mean, for him, make America great again was just a catchy selling point. Running for president was just a free PR machine, a bargain. Whether he won or lost, he would get a colossal amount of free publicity. Perfect for a guy who, according to Warren Buffett, who actually quite likes the guy, says that he's a flaky businessman, but he is very good at licensing his name.
Well, he had some major failures, and he was very good at licensing, and he was very good at things that involved promotion of his name. Actual operation of the businesses in the 1980s and 1990s, you know, it left him essentially bankrupting. You know, I would say he understands business, but his record has been better at licensing and than operations. Putting out his own capital. Yeah.
His publicly traded Trump casino empire business, no major U.S. company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy more.
Oh, and of course, on a campaign of bad-mouthing Congress, the one with approval ratings hovering in the teens. You're not going to lose many votes like that in America. Yeah, Trump's kind of defined himself about making money. In fact, part of me thinks that he didn't actually want or expect to win, because now he's actually shackled to the presidency for the next 4 years. Yeah, it's kind of difficult to see this as the evil tyrant. And hell, even if he was, he's too old. He's 70. Statistically, there's about a 5% chance that he will die in any given year at the moment. Problem is, of course, if he does, then you're lumbered with a creationist as a president. You know, one who thinks that you can pray the gay away. Bottom line, a lot of the videos that I've made that had very bad ratings when they were put out have been treated better as time has gone on. That being said, I'm not actually that interested in politics. You know, only the big stuff that'll make an absolute pointless mess for years to come. Things like the Iraq War, or the infection of universities by social justice warriors, or Brexit. And yes, Trump, having a scientifically illiterate game show host as a president. It's difficult to see there's going to be a happy ending to this. So yeah, if I were to try and sum it up in one line, it would be something along the lines of part-time president runs inept, Nixon-esque type presidency with his children. And for those of you who are just completely sold over on the fact that at least Trump stood up to the social justice warriors, well, yeah, that was until someone delivered a fairly polite message to Mike Pence at the theater.
Guests in the audience this evening. And Vice President-elect Pence, I see you're walking out, but I hope you will hear us just a few more moments. But we truly hope that this show has inspired you to uphold our American values and to work on behalf of all of us. All of us.
At which point, Trump decided that his vice president needed a safe space where he could be free from harassment. You know, because this is such terrible harassment.
We, sir, we are the diverse America who are alarmed and anxious that your new administration will not protect us, our planet, our children, our parents, or defend us and uphold our inalienable rights, sir.
Yes, they were rude, and they should apologize. Well, bugger me if that isn't exactly what they told me when the social justice warriors kicked me off Free Thought Blogs. So maybe this is a suitable place to wrap this up, in that just like the social justice warriors have thrown around terms like misogynist or Nazi to the point where they've been diluted to the point where they've essentially lost any sting that they initially had. The alt-right, well, maybe I should go make some distinctions here, the third wave alt-right has thrown around terms like salty and cuck and social justice warrior and so forth, till they really have kind of lost their meaning to the point where, had this not been Trump, had this been anyone else putting out tweets like this, they would have been accusing them of being a social justice warrior, that they were triggered by someone being rude to them, that they wanted their feelings protected, that they wanted a safe space. Had it been anyone else but Trump. Maybe just someone to think about in how liberally you use these terms.